Hey, 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 Dr. Minesha here, affectionately known as Dr. M, and I want to welcome you to the Peace Driven Leader Lounge, where leaders of leaders are serious about real transformation. I'm so excited to be able to introduce to you Miss Katherine Clausen, that is in the lounge with us all the way from Tennessee on this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. So good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, before Catherine introduces herself, I want to make sure that I kind of set some ground rules for those of you all who are listening for the very first time. Welcome, welcome. It is always a pleasure to be able to connect with new leaders. Most of the people that listen to this podcast are corporate leaders of leaders, are entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, seasoned entrepreneurs, people who just love to grow and they want to be able to do it in a space that feels sacred and a space that is very legacy forward. So the conversation that we have is what I call conversations that matter. We talk about real world things, things that impact our leadership and things that will allow us to love, live, and lead differently. What's differently? Well, we're all are different in our own right. And so you get to decide what different looks like to you. And that's the thing that makes our journey so beautiful is that we get to sit and rise authentically in our own space. So with that being said, Catherine, welcome again. So good to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. As you said, I'm Katherine Clausen. I am owner of Your Empowered Solutions, which is a business and leadership coaching firm. My background is I have 25 plus years of business and leadership experience with a Fortune 500 company. I was fortunate enough that I won many awards for my leadership, and district was high performing. My region was high performing. I did a lot of mentoring, teaching, and training, which is my passion. I love helping people succeed.
Hmm. That's a good thing to love, helping people succeed. So, before we get started in the conversation, how do you define and help your leaders define success?
Success is different for every person. And so through our conversation, we define what success looks like for that person. And then we bridge the gap from where they're currently at to what their version of success looks like. Because my definition and your definition is probably different. Um,
Absolutely.
and leadership is especially even a different success goal from maybe your personal business or something like that.
Absolutely. And I love the way you use the word different because I truly believe that, just respecting that and honoring that and understanding that success looks different, then what that does is it allows us to be able to lead in a way that's honorable for that person. And it also helps with motivating them and inspiring them, I should say. I like inspiring better because it's happening within them and it's more
Mhm.
sustaining. What is success for you? How do you define it?
That is a great question. I define success for myself personally by my abilities to be able to help others. When I see somebody else that I've been working with and I see them light up and I know that they're going to be able to take the information and move forward and be successful in their own authentic way is is my
You feel like
jam. It's what
yeah, you
really
feel like you
lights
yeah,
me up. So that's my version of success.
I love that. It sounds a lot too like it is about you walking in your calling, you know? Leadership is a calling, and when you walk in that, you feel like you're being successful as long as you're doing what you were created to do. Did I hear that correctly?
You did. You absolutely summed that up perfectly.
So, like, for those of you who are listening and, you're unsure about what that calling looks like, or some of us, I think sometimes we just overanalyze what calling is, and it's the very thing that we do naturally, and sometimes it's easy for us to overlook it. But one of the things that I love to do is timeline exercises where you can take the top 10 things that you experience in life that when I say like monumental, pivotal things that your brain just holds on to, and you really look at that thread. And I did it with some clients at what we call our tea chats, where it's just sacred spaces for leaders just to be. A lot of them wear t-shirts, we drink our tea and we just be, we talk about real stuff. And we did this exercise and we looked back all the way from elementary school, middle, high school, and we went on. We were able to see threads and patterns through our life that just it reaffirmed and assured our calling. Like, man, I was doing this way before I even knew this was a thing, even the interests in the books. So when we think about that, and you go back, Catherine, and you look at your, let's say, your 12-year-old version of yourself, what are things that you now notice that you look back and you're like, huh, I was doing that then? What did that look like?
For me, that looked like Girl Scouts and leading the way with helping teach how to build fires and helping how to put tents up and teaching the younger kids just different ways to do the skill sets that we had already learned, and passing that down. I often worked with the younger kids, so teaching and training and helping people succeed has been in my DNA for a very long time. And it's interesting, it took me a long time to learn that that was what my jam was, because to me it came easy. It was what I enjoyed reading about, it was what I enjoyed studying. So it took me a while to understand the value of something that comes easily. And I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of leaders make, is they don't understand that just because it comes easily for them doesn't mean it's a skill or it's a success tip or it's a goal that would be easy for somebody else to
Absolutely.
maintain.
Absolutely. And I love the way you said that, like, once I realized, because it really is a journey, right? This self identity and understanding the worthiness that, understanding how we're divinely designed and and really giving the value back to where it already was in its original state. It's just that somewhere along the way, we were taught, outside of ourselves that we had to pursue this and accomplish this and achieve this in order to get that form of worthiness, right? But when I listen to you, it's like you experience a journey of self-discovery. But did that also happen during the Girl Scout years, or like how does that self-discovery journey look like for you?
For me, it was college. It was in college. I was working as a vision center associate, and I was challenged to take my direct speech and make it less honest. And
Oh,
I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but I realized that sometimes being direct can be hurtful, and it doesn't have to be. And it can still be honest, but there
mm,
are ways to speak and there are ways to influence that is part of leadership that
mm,
helps build people up instead of tear them down. And so for me, that was a true learning curve and experience, due to the fact that I would just be blatantly honest and
mm,
say things like, "That was just wrong. What were you thinking?" Instead of, "Hey, have you thought of trying it this way? It might give you a better result." So I was really learning that leadership was and truly a skill that needed to be learned, instead of just something I could go by with charisma, or I could go by with, "Hey, I know the right way to do this." And so it really helped me turn around my communication style and skills, which in turn helped me move up the ladder, because I was able to still be honest, still be direct, but do it in a way that built people up, which is the most important thing to me. I was
mm.
crushed when I learned I was hurting people's feelings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
What you're talking about here, and this is something I really want to unpack because this is huge what you share. This is what I call the EQ. It's the emotional intelligence, not what I call it. This is what it is, right? It's just our ability to be emotionally in tune to the people that we are leading says a lot about our ability to influence them. And I love that you brought this up because just because you have the degree or just because you have no no, but I really want to dive into this about the emotional intelligence because a lot of leaders, they're exceptional in their what they've been able to achieve as far as their titles and as far as the things they've been able to accomplish, right? But it takes a different part of your brain to really tap into empathy and listening and connectivity, and one of my biggest saying is that we must connect before we redirect, and sometimes as leaders, it's really easy for us to see what needs to be changed, that we do it in the compromise of the relationship. So I would love to hear your strategies and your ideologies around how you create a space and a culture for honesty, but at the same time, like you said, empathy as well.
Yes. Well, I think one of the most important things to understand is everybody that you lead needs a different version of your leadership. You cannot be the same person to, let's say, Mike, who needs the direct and the, let's say, accountability type
Mhm.
of leadership that you need to be to somebody else that needs to ask questions to really understand, because once they understand every angle of the new direction, they can take off and run with it, and you don't ever have to go back and touch that subject with them again because they fully understand it, versus the person that actually does need some hand holding and some built up that yes they can do it, and that it's not as big a deal as they think it is, and yes it's a change, but change can be good, and you really have to pay attention to what each of your people need from you. And it's not that you're being inauthentic with any of them. You're still being your true authentic self, but you're giving them what they need in order to go out and be successful, which in turn makes you, the leader, even more successful and more free to go out and really pursue the goals and the dreams or the expectations that are being given to you when your team can fully trust that you have their backs and that you can speak to them where they're at and what they need from you.
Oh,
Uh,
that's so good. Like you're talking here, and all I'm thinking about is a conversation I had with my husband this morning. So, for all of our married people, I like to put the life twist on work topics. And so, here's a life twist. First of all, are you married, Catherine? You
I
have
am,
children?
yes.
Okay. Tell us that background. Married, how long? Children?
So we've only been married 2 years, but we were high school sweethearts. So we've actually had a relationship on and off through most of our adult life. And we just got married 2 years ago. And
I
I
love
moved from
it.
Dallas, Texas to a small town in Tennessee for love, and I have not regretted it yet.
Oh
So,
my gosh, what a
yes,
sweet
my
love.
husband likes to say that he has his first truck and his first girlfriend when we're riding around in it.
You can't beat that with a bat. I know that's an amazing feeling. Tell him,
Yeah.
look, I don't blame him not one bit. He did good. Did good. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I really want to like bring in relationships because as we have leaders. You lead in your home first, right? So we have parent leaders also. And maybe you don't have biological children, but you're leading. There's children around you at some capacity. They're looking at you to model this behavior, whether it's your niece or whoever that God has placed, whatever children God has placed in your space. And so my question to you is this, right? Because you said something that made a good point in terms of how people receive information and how they process information. And I do believe, and sometimes it's harder when you're dealing with adults than it is with children, because there's expectations that we do place on adults that may or may not be fair, right? There's assumptions that are made just because of we're adults, right?
Mhm.
You should,
Yes.
oh, ba ba ba. You should not have taken it this way or whatever because,
Yes.
you know. And so, just first of all, removing that piece. But I guess my question to you is where the line is when it comes to both people, and in this case, I'm talking about adult, or in marriage or in a situation where you're a team over your adult team leaders, right? At which point does what you need conflict or triggers or makes challenging what I need to communicate? You know what I mean? So, like, I'll give you
Mhm.
an example. It's like when I'm waking up, I go through this whole process in my morning flow and my morning routine where I go through the things and I have a very intentional time with my husband where I'm talking through matters that we have a game plan for. Like, here's what I'm working on. This is what's happening. Especially in finances, we do our leadership meetings and we talk about those things. And so sometimes he likes to process like creatively, like just freely, wherever. I have my set time I process. Yeah. So he'll come at me while I'm in I'm out of that phase. I'm shifted into the next phase of my day. And he's like asking me a question that I felt like we covered when we were in that moment. Right. So
Mhm.
now that process is like interrupting my process. And
Right.
so that's what I'm curious to know is that if you have a person who needs to digest information and ask questions, and then you have another person who is not that way, which leader is the one to say, okay, I know this is how you like to get information. Let's see if we can come up with another way, which you can get your thing out, and I get my thing out. Like, who's compromising? Like, I'm thinking, like, well, do I lose myself by saying, okay, you could just spew out whatever thoughts you have, and I'm going to pause, and I'm going to make room for you, because I know this is important. Like, where does the compromise so that everybody is kind of in this space where, you know, they
Right.
are at their highest state of, or is it just one of those things where you just compromise? Somebody has to be that bigger person and just
I think it all comes down to communications and what bargains or agreements you have negotiated with that other person, especially in a marriage. Because you have to sit down and you have to say, this is how I do things. This is how you do things. What is our agreement here? And then sometimes you have to gently remind, hey, we had this agreement. I need process time. Can we wait for this conversation for another 30 minutes? And then
mm,
you just clearly state that this is what you need without being overbearing or angry. It's just, this is what I need. Can I do this? And that way it's a win-win type compromise instead of somebody just always giving in. It's
mm.
um
It's like, well, that's
my
all dual responsibility because
yes,
he would then have to wait 30 minutes, which is counterintuitive to his nature.
right.
So he would have to write it down, whatever we need to do. But I like that because it's what I was thinking needed to happen is that middle ground. Uh,
Mhm.
and I love the way you said the agreement. And I want you all that are listening to listen really clear, especially if you're married, because he made an example. He was like, your team asks you questions and, you don't mind. And I was like, first of all, I pay them. So it's very different because if they, if I say to them, this is the time frame that I would like for you to ask. Like if I'm sharing something, now is the time for you to ask clarifying questions. Ask me that now. And then later, if you have another question, I like for people to reframe their question. Like, I even tell my kids that, like, don't ask the part you already know. Frame it in the way, like, take your context and frame your assumption. Like, hey, are we still going to them like we said? Versus asking the exact same question that we literally just went through. I don't know why that's my thing, but it's like my pet peeve is asking questions you already know the answer to. Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, well, I just wanted an update. Then ask that. That's
Yes.
the wrong question. So I'm just trying to like, should the leader be training the people on how to best communicate with them? Or should the leader be taking how all the people that they lead communicate and folding or not folding, that may sound, or meeting them where they are? Who has the greater like because we're both leaders in essence.
Yes. So I'm going to frustrate you and tell you that the answer to that question is yes. Because it's both. We do both as leaders. You have to teach and train the ways that best help you get the information you need from them. But at the same time, there are going to be times when you're going to have to step back and be the one that goes, okay, they need to do this. And a good way to think of that is female versus male communication style, which really has nothing to do with gender. But the male communication style tends to be very direct, very point focused, very this is what you need to do, this is what I need to do, and this is how I go. The female communicator needs to include a lot of detail and they need to include, yellow sock, left foot, they need to include a lot of details.
They
The
talk
thing
about details.
Yes, and they talk about the details. The thing is sometimes if you don't let the female communicator get those points out, they actually can't get to the part where they can communicate with
Mm,
you.
what? My goodness.
Yeah. So
Well, listen,
sometimes with a female communicator. Now the other thing is if the male I flip back and forth. If I'm in work mode, I tend to be a masculine communicator. So sometimes what I would have to do is I would say, I want to hear your story, but I need to know what you need me to do. Because I need to do that first before I can listen to what you need to do. And they can then tell you as long as they know that you'll be there later to what we call hold the basket for them to put all the facts into.
that's so good. Now we are almost there when it comes to my boys' fathers, my first marriage. That would have been a blessed conversation. I'm talking real stuff, you all, and I would love to talk about that when you have more difficult relationships because this stuff really works when you're dealing with two people. Again, my team, of course, they're going to submit and understand what it is that I'm needing and they're going to want to meet that, right? There's a level of cooperation there.
Mhm.
But when you're talking to someone that's closer to you and you say something like, "Hey, I need for you to make your request first, make your request known first. Let me hold that so I'm understanding." And then you can share the rest of the stuff. To me, that's like watching the movie trailer before I go into the movie. My mind just needs to know what is the storyline here? What are we doing? You know? So my question to you then, because we talk about in best case scenarios, but what about when you're dealing with that difficult person who's like, no, I mean, I need to be able to get this out. Like this is what it is that they're refusing to give you what it is that they need because they feel like what they need is precedent. And that's where boundaries need to enter in, or is that where the leader just needs to suck it up and just say, hey, they're not in a place where they can do that. Let me meet them where they are and, and just
Again, it would depend on the scenario and the situation for all of that. I mean, if you're in the middle of an argument, then neither one of you is gonna yield at that point. You're
not
both gonna
argument again.
be
It's just communication, not
so if it's
argument.
just communication at that point, then especially if it's your spouse, then it becomes a what do they need from me to avoid this altercation?
Mm,
And if I give this to them now, will they be able to give me what I need later? And the answer to that is usually yes with a spouse. If you can give them what they need in that moment to avoid the meltdown or to avoid the to fight, then 20 minutes later they're like, "Okay, what did you need?"
yeah, you're right.
It
And
clears the thing.
yeah, even in difficult situations, even in difficult relationships, if you and I'm thinking about a saying that a good friend of mine says, "Fall on the sword." If you fall on the sword and still give them what they need in absence of what you need, then you're right. It's like they just need to get it out or process it out, and you withhold what you need to give them what they need. If you feel like, what was the last part? If you feel like it is,
That it'll be reciprocated later, that it
yeah,
will truly that it's a give and take relationship, but right now they need.
yeah, I love that.
And then later they'll give to you when they're cleared and their emotions are gone. They'll be like, "Okay, hey, what did you need?"
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
find that in most healthy relationships, that does help.
Absolutely.
Taking a
Leadership,
break also helps.
yeah, absolutely. Leadership is something else. I love it so much because it really is like that fire that refines. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel good all the time. It has its moments, especially like you said, you light up when you see, the transformation happening in people that told you stories and things they wanted to do. And now you see them moving in that and you see their essence changing. You see them, you witness them transforming. It's the most incredible feeling to a
It
leader.
really is.
And I love the conversation because we like to talk about the things that most leaders don't talk about. And that is the difficult people that we have to lead, the difficult personalities. And I'm saying it difficult lightly because when we first started the podcast, we talked about difference. So maybe
Mhm.
we should move that in the word. I'll change that word from difficult to different because it feels less judgy,
Yeah.
right? And I love that. Embracing each other's difference. So what feels like difficulty is really different. And that's why it's harder to like align it as someone who's like you and I, when we're work mode, we can go because we both have that energy there. But it's about being able to understand that we don't live in a world with everyone who process and thinks and like us. And I believe that that is where the elevated version of our leadership really can shine. Tell me about a realistic or practical time where you had to do this in your own leadership.
I think the one that comes most to mind is one of the managers that I worked with. She always had to ask a lot of questions,
Hmm.
which was fine, but there's a time and place for it. So, like on conference calls, I would have to tell her, "Hey, I appreciate your questions, and you're probably asking questions that other people have. However, let me call you back after the conference call, or I'm going to be there on Tuesday and we can sit down and we can talk through this. And that would allow me to get back on track with my conference calls. It allowed her to feel heard, and she knew later that I would be addressing her. Now, the important part of that is I never forgot to follow up, right? Because I had made a commitment. If you just keep saying, "Oh, I'll get to you later, I'll get to you later," and never do it, that's a dismissal, and that's completely different from leadership. Following up, giving her a call 30 minutes later and saying, "Okay, what are the rest of your questions?"
Yeah, that was an excellent example. I mean, hit it right in the nail because that's the type of stuff that we as leaders deal with is that literally my saying yes to you can't be saying no to me because I'm going to lose my thought and the rest of the team also needs to know what needs to be delivered. And so I love that so much that you acknowledged it and to make sure that they're seen and allowed them to be able to get it out when the time was most appropriate.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Well, and the other, win from that is that eventually, within 2 months of us doing that, she would say, "I have questions later, can you call me?" rather than disrupting the whole thing. So she learned that she could trust that I would follow up with her later,
Oh,
and
so
that I didn't have problems with her asking questions, I just needed it to be at a more appropriate time. So that made the communication even more smooth because she felt heard, she was understood, and she could just ask me for time later rather than disrupting the call with all of her questions. And it worked out well for all of us.
absolutely. Now, was there a point where that the team got to know what her questions were? Because I do agree that sometimes people ask questions that other people didn't think about. So
There was a couple other managers that would say, "Wait, wait, what are her questions? I might have them," because they got used to relying on her to ask all of the
yeah,
questions.
yeah.
And I swear sometimes they'd send a message to her saying, "Hey, ask this," because it was like, y'all can
That
too.
becomes like yeah, so now it becomes it has even more greater value, to the team by
Yeah,
being the one that's expected to ask the question. That is so powerful and such a great example because when it comes to questions, that's something that a lot of people, adults, feel insecure and are reluctant to do. And the leader sets the tone 100% with the culture that is, I'm scared to ask a question. Let me not ask a question. That's all determined on how the leader handles it. And those questions really could be great gateways to new ideas. So
they most definitely
that's
can be.
awesome. How you posture yourself for questions and how you handle them, how you hold space with your team is a game changer in and of itself, and how much your team can feel like they can bring ideas and be creative, and that's what you want. You want creativity in
Mhm.
your home, in your household, coming up with solutions. That's the type of energy that you want. This is great. I love that. So if tell us a little bit more, about your focus. Do you focus more so on culture? Do you focus more on productivity? What is your wheelhouse?
So a little bit of both. It really, again, all depends on what the client is trying to achieve. Because there's different things. Sometimes it can be all around mindset, and that's what you spend the majority of your time on. However, when you're focusing on the mindset, it also goes into productivity, right? Because if you have the right mindset, then you're more productive. And as you're more productive, you get more done, the culture is happier. Sometimes it can be all about productivity. Like I have a great mindset, but I'm procrastinating, or I have a great mindset, but I disagree with this direction that the company's
Yeah.
giving me. And so you have to work around those type of challenges. So again, I really focus on where the client currently is versus where they want to be. And I work in the gap in between because that is the most important area when they know where they want to go. Now, if they don't know where they wanna go, that's a different conversation that we have so we can figure it out where they
Yes.
want to be.
Absolutely. I love that. Because if you are a leader and you're listening to this and you're not clear about where you want to be, I can tell you right now that's the number one focus because you have people following you. And the most dangerous, reckless thing that we can do as leaders is to not crystallize our vision. And that's one of the things I
Absolutely.
talk about a lot. There's a lot of different dimensions in which we have to look at our vision and to make sure that it is communicated in a way. Because sometimes we can communicate our vision in the way our brain processes really understanding that we are truly different and we process things differently is going to be one of the biggest leadership um, principles and perspectives that you can have because it keeps you open and curious to how did you hear that when I said that, what did you hear,
Mhm.
it'll keep you asking seemingly simple questions, but they're extremely significant when it comes to building trust and people feeling that what they have to say matters.
Well, and you bring up a good point. You allow the questions to happen. You personally ask them and you hear the answers, you ask them for their feedback, and then it becomes this collaboration that can take off and take your entire team, your entire family, even yourselves to whole new levels that you didn't know were possible before because you've allowed for questions and answers. You've allowed for follow-up. You've allowed for breathing space for people to be different and bring different talents and different communication styles, and it just it's like Boulder, once it starts down the hill, it's gonna
Mhm.
take over and just do everything, but if you put little shards and little stuff in the way, it's never gonna make it down the hill, and so you as the leader, it's your job to remove those.
Absolutely. I agree 1,000%. And as we get ready to land this plane of conversation, I'm going to throw a curveball to you right now, just because I know that you are top of your game. Your experience is top tier. And this is a tricky one, can be for some. And so, just this is in reference to current events. It's very new. You may not even heard that it happened, but there was an award ceremony. I believe it took place in Britain and or Scotland, one of those places. I'm not sure, but it was a big award ceremony that took place, and the two actors from Sinners, Michael B. Jordan and Delroy, a very seasoned actor, both African American, who were on the stage, and one of the someone in the audience yelled out a racial slur, and while they were getting their awards, come to find out the person who did it had Tourette's, and so a part of that just inappropriate outburst. Many people are not familiar with the condition, and so, there I think about the leadership and who I like to come up with real life scenarios like this from a leadership perspective on who needed to own that because it was pre-recorded. And so they had a 2-hour lapse and it still was not omitted out. From my understanding, there were other things that was said with other people, maybe 2 or 3 times, nothing that was too disruptive. But and they weren't racial slurs, they were just inappropriate. But it was left in the recording, and then, of course, now it's like a real huge, um, conversation in the US and abroad about how they were how that circumstance impacted their, you know,
Mhm.
been triggering trauma, not just for the people that they did to, but for the people that, were in the audience that had to hear it. Just triggering that this is supposed to be a moment of their success. We're now moving up in a space where we're being acknowledged for our work, and then this is said. Who would you put the accountability on when it came to that happening?
The network. Quite
Mhm.
honestly, they should not have done that. I mean, it's horrible on all ways, but if they had time to edit that out, they should have. My thought is that the actors probably handled it with their usual grace and style.
Mhm.
Um,
Did actually. It was very, very
yeah,
was
I can't imagine either one of those fantastic actors doing anything other than handling it with their grace and style that they have. But you also have to feel sorry for that poor person that has the Tourette system that can't control it, that hears those things and then the brain just for whatever reason latches onto them and they can't stop it. I mean, not only did they try and humiliate the actors by leaving it in there, but they actually did humiliate the person with Tourette's.
That's it, and so what's happening is that person is actually being attacked mostly by people who truly just don't understand. So they're making comments like, "Oh, well, it was in his heart." Now I get how it happened, but that doesn't explain what he said because they don't understand the way that condition works. So then now
Yeah.
he becomes the target. So you're absolutely I can say I agree 1,000% with the leadership behind that. And I wanna kinda take this to what this looks like in a workplace environment as well when you have that individual in the team who may produce really well, but they have disabilities or they have things that are obviously different about them that could create a disruption amongst the team culture. I mean, it's just obvious, when they come in and maybe they say things it's very direct, but they're exceptional workers, or maybe you have that tech person that has zero personality. They're just, they don't laugh at the jokes, it's just, but they're really good at what they do. Like, how do you, as the leader, kind of create this melting pot of love and inclusivity when you have such a obvious difference?
If it's something that's obvious, like Tourette's, then you have them explain what it is. I mean, you
Mhm.
sit down and say, "All right, we have a new team member. They have this disability, and I'm going to let them explain what it does and how it affects them, and what you guys can expect from them." We had somebody that had narcolepsy that would fall asleep, and I had them explain what it does and how it happens because she would be fine 1 minute, and then 20 minutes later, you would find her in the corner
Yeah.
nodding
Yeah.
off, but she couldn't help it. So she sat down and she explained it, and it helped the team understand how to do it. Now, when you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have an obvious issue, they're just kind of techie, they're just kind of eh, not not a lot of EQ there. That can make it very tough, especially for somebody that's high EQ and really needs to have their emotionals read. And normally there's just a disconnect between those two. And as a leader, you bridge the gap, right? You help them at least tolerate one another, not be hostile. Not
Right.
everybody's gonna like everybody, and as a leader, you can't make that happen, but you can make it a non-hostile environment for both of them.
Yeah, I love that, so much, and I find myself even doing that sometimes with the adult, because my husband, though, he's very, like, traditional, but, because I said so, so sometimes I would, "What your dad is trying to say." So then I try to say, what he's meaning is, you have to, because I know it's hard and sometimes it doesn't come off the way I would say it, just to kinda create that bridge. I love the way you use the word bridge, that's really
Mhm.
good. I mean, the more I hear you talk, the more evident and the more joy that I get by seeing. I feel like our conversation made leadership so like precedent. It really helped for people to see how everything, just like John Maxwell says, rises and falls on leadership. So for those who are listening today, I just want to encourage you. I hope that our conversation brought light to you. And if nothing else, that you saw that the seat that you sit in is extraordinary. You really have amazing opportunity to bring forth insight, inspiration to others, to move people with hope, and to move them in the place of their greatest self, operating at their highest state of productivity, all by something you say or influence or encourage, or a collaboration that you initiate. That is power, and to me, it's about stewarding that power, and having conversations like this really helps you to steward it well, because you may think that just not getting back because you got busy and you call them back and say, "Hey, I know I'm supposed to answer those questions, but this, and screwing off all of your tasks and things that you had to do is going to put a band-aid over that situation, and that's all it's going to do. The scar and the wound is still there, and they're still going to feel it. So just keep that in mind. All right. Now, with one thing left to say, what would you leave the audience on today with? What would be your final words that you want to share? If you had to think of one thing to leave the people with today, what would that be?
Investing in yourself to empower yourself is hugely important.
Investing in yourself to empower yourself. You heard it here first, most likely at the Peace Driven Leader Lounge with Catherine, dropping gems in the studio on today. You did amazing. Thank you so much for your wisdom, for your insight. It was so natural, so real, so practical, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful to you,
Thank you.
and that our audience is as well. It is pleasure to have you. And for those who are listening for the first time, continue to check us out. Download our iLead We Rise app if you haven't already, where we have profound leaders from all across the planet that are sharing their journey and their stories with wisdom, insight, legacy level insights from a leadership perspective, so that you don't have to go at this leadership journey alone. It's not easy. And it's not about how much you carry, it's how well you carry it. And so take heed to what has been said today. Lean into those areas that cause your soul to stir. That is where growth, that's the edge of growth, and that's where it takes place. And I'll leave this final statement with you. Peace driven leadership is not something you find, it's something you create. And this here now is your moment to create it. Until the next episode, bye bye for now.